Pro TV, binge-worthy learning for IT teams. Why is it binge-worthy? It's learning presented in an engaging and entertaining talk show format that beats voice-over PowerPoint snooze fests. Watch over 3,300 hours of content in their on-demand library, on your desktop, on the go, or in the comfort of your own living room. IT Pro TV is IT training you and your team actually want to watch, which means a better return on your learning investment. Get started with IT Pro TV for teams by visiting itpro.tv/security weekly and start a 7-day free trial and get 30% off standard or premium IT Pro TV memberships using the code SECWeekly30. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/PSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame. Automate the hunt. Welcome back, everyone, to Pulse Security Weekly. This is the security news for this week. Where do you guys like to start this week?
Microsoft Excel
and JavaScript, because we all love JavaScript. I mean, how can you at this point you pretty much have to love JavaScript in some capacity?
Well, when it's in Excel, what's not to love?
Right? As a pen tester, Joff is like, yes, I fully support this movement to have JavaScript in everything, including Excel.
Making Excel beefier every day.
Yes.
What is most interesting about this is it makes me wonder, like, how they are interpreting the JavaScript inside of Excel. Is Excel now a browser? Like, come on, what is going on here?
Is it in the full Excel suite, or is it an Office 365 thing?
I think it's installed. I think it's actually Microsoft Excel installed, as far as I understand.
They still have that?
I was going to say,
I know,
do they
right?
still have
Who
that?
knew?
Or is it all 365?
I thought
I
Microsoft was
haven't,
aggressively pushing people to Office 365.
Oh yeah.
Well, in that
they
case, it would
definitely
make perfect sense that they would actually introduce it, right? And actually, it says here. So for now, JavaScript custom functions for Excel have made it in Developer Preview Edition for Windows, Mac, iPads, and Excel Online. Excel Online only to Office 365 subscribers. So it's the probably installed client of Office 365.
Right. There is a yes. That is an option. Which, I mean, you may say like, well, who's actually using a full Excel? If you've ever used Google Sheets and compared to the functionality that you get in Excel, I mean, even as lightly as I use Excel for just basic stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, I need the actual version of it. So.
Interestingly, universities tend to give out licenses to this as well for installed software of different Office suites. So when I was at University of New Hampshire, they gave us a full license to Office 365, and then they told you to download it to your computer.
But you had Office 365 when you were in college, Keith?
This is when I was back taking classes at university, not when I was in college.
Okay.
I'm not.
I was gonna wow, you're like really young. Like I'm really old, and you're really young. Like wow. I feel old right now.
I felt like I needed to go get my walker there for a minute. And I was like, oh man.
I think Joff had like VisiCalc maybe.
And Word.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I was taking classes at the university, they're like, here's this link to Office 365 and you can download the clients locally to your computer here. And I was like, sweet. Now I get free copies of the latest versions of all of my Office software that I haven't updated in 7 or 8 years.
Right?
Yeah, it's an update.
Yeah,
so you don't update your Office versions either.
Right. Well, I mean, let's be honest. Who does?
Joff has a spreadsheet he's going to send you after the show, Keith.
Maybe not even after the show.
Maybe right now. Maybe there'll be some JavaScript in it.
Tell them it's an award for doing such a good job on the podcast.
Oh, I like how you flipped that on its head, Jeff. That's great.
There we go. There we go. It's the Pavlovian in me is very proud of you, Jeff.
Pavlovian twice in one show.
In one show.
Ding, 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 ding.
We have the Pavlovian.
As long as
think
we're not
that's
adding
Keith's new
Skinner,
word this
or well,
week.
so ironically, a little bit of an aside. The only thing I needed to remember in history of psychology from Sigmund Freud was two things that my professor taught. One, he is wrong. Two, he is dead. That's all you need to remember about Sigmund Freud. So now we've covered at least two psychologists. I'm now done for the night.
I thought it was
pronounced Freud. Sigmund Freud. Come on now.
I thought
Whatever.
I thought all of it was about like your relationship with your mom. Wasn't that Freud's thing?
Keith?
Technically, it was your mom, but yeah.
Oh,
I left my copy of can't find my copies of his book. I think it's on your mom's dresser.
All right. But yeah, so
I was
interestingly,
gonna say,
when
don't
you
bring
think
up
about
scary topics, Paul.
Yeah.
Just stop bringing
Going
up the
back
scary
to
topics.
JavaScript for a moment, though. So I've been doing some more of deep learning of the language, right? So like the idioms of the language, double equals versus triple equals, and what that actually means.
Wait,
It
what
really does
are we
make
talking about?
wonders.
English
language?
Wait, what are we talking about? What language?
JavaScript.
Oh,
JavaScript.
okay.
So,
Sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
I'm interested to know how they've interpreted JavaScript inside of Excel, right? So are they literally bolting on a JavaScript interpreter into Excel to read Excel functions? Are they doing limited interpretation of those Excel JavaScript functions? I'm curious to know, like, first of all, what's the use case? And secondly, what limitations does it have? Because if it's full JavaScript, then that means there must be a browser and a document object model inside of Excel, which, why?
Keith, we never go full JavaScript. Just, throwing that out there.
There's always been a browser in Office products, right? It's not talked about much, but it's always been there. So
Really?
the why actually kind of baffles me. It's like, and I'm thinking it's all about Office 365. Ultimately, I think they're going to end up with some sort of cross-linked functionality going on down the road. But I don't know. That's just me speculating.
So I thought this one was interesting, and I haven't, fully digested the article. But it says we need bug bounties for bad algorithms. In the age of algorithmic even decision-making, we need to incentivize algorithmic auditors to become our new immune system. And really, partly this was for Keith and partly for Jeff. And to Jeff, I think we've always had a bug bounty for algorithms when we evaluate crypto, when we put crypto out there and ask people to evaluate it. Because crypto is just an algorithm,
I don't
right?
actually know what the reward system is, other than I think they actually just get paid because NIST has got it's called a contest, so I'm sure there is some sort of a reward offered. I don't know what it is, but they're trying to come up with new algorithms for public key cryptography once quantum computing kicks in and breaks all the the current public key cryptography.
So my question would be is who's going to pay the bounty and how do you price it, right? So there's nothing like this out there today that's actually talking about algorithms for bounty payment. Bugs in code for features that went wrong via Google paying out for them, or security bugs are fairly well known, but I don't even know how you would say that this is a security flaw in the algorithm, let alone actually get someone to pay you for it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how much of a difference there is between the seeing this as an algorithm and then often seeing it as a business logic flaw.
Yeah, I agree with Patrick. It can be tough to, kind of pinpoint, is it a bug in the code or a flaw in the algorithm, or how do you draw those lines?
Now,
Yeah,
I
well,
didn't
so
read
it
the
makes-
article.
it
Are
makes
we
this
really
happen.
talking
Wow,
crypto
everyone started
algorithms?
talking.
Should I
at
keep
once.
talking too?
Everyone was talking. Okay, Jeff.
I'm sorry. I didn't read the whole article. Are we really talking about crypto algorithms, or are they talking about other types of algorithms?
They're talking, I believe, about other types of algorithms. I made the analogy to crypto algorithms because
Okay,
It
but
made it
more
sound
like
like it was something-
decision-making algorithms, logic flow within
Sure.
code.
Yeah,
Okay.
I made
Yeah, so-
that distinction because they made it sound like it was something that we're not doing that we should be doing. And my argument was, but crypto is essentially about the algorithm, and we've kind of had these pseudo bug bounties, right? Jeff mentioned NIST and how they put that out there for public comment, and there, in a lot of cases, could be a reward associated with that. So we've kind of already had it. We just maybe need to apply it outside of crypto, perhaps.
Right.
This article is specifically talking to human-computer interaction and bias, actually, is what they're really getting at. So basically the way you train the algorithm ultimately ends up being the way that it reacts to things. So interestingly, and I don't think it's covered in the news articles, is recently it was announced this week that for the person that was killed from the Uber or whatever, I think it might have been Uber automatic driving car, right? Like the self-driving car. That
Arizona.
was killed.
I think it was Arizona.
Yeah, they called that a algorithmic flaw, because what ended up happening was it identified that the person was there, but it determined it was a false positive.
And
So,
loosely
I wonder if
based
that's the
because
sort of thing that would count here.
the person wasn't in the crosswalk. It wasn't where they were supposed to be, I'm guessing. Because that's what I had heard earlier.
Is it too early to make jokes about that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's probably too early to make jokes.
Okay. I mean, I do feel bad that someone died, but I mean, did they list the cause of death as false positive? All right, it was too soon, but I just couldn't resist.
So fair enough.
soon.
Here's what's going to happen is Skynet's going to remember this, Paul, and you're going to be the first to go. So it's
right.
fine. You know,
Like, Paul made that comment one time.
Well,
there's a
go ahead, Jeff.
there's a feature classifier, right? Most artificial intelligence algorithms, they're built on one of two things, right? They're either neural networks or they're decision tree based with feature classification included in them. So one thing that bothers me about this particular article is what qualifies for a bad algorithm, because if you're using an artificial intelligence algorithm that is based on feature classification and the implementer chooses a poor feature classification, that is not necessarily an algorithmic issue. So I'm a little, and I've read about half of it, I have to admit. So I need to probably reread it, but I'm a little bothered by it.
Are you?
I'm bothered by it too, and I don't know if it's for the same reasons that you're sort of getting at, Jeff. But if this article is being written because of the automatic car killing somebody, and we're trying to assign blame, we're trying to figure out what went wrong, and we're jumping forward to the point of bug bounty in terms of decision making algorithms. I mean, we're talking machine learning, artificial intelligence right now, right? I guess I'm bothered because of the attempt for the lack of a better term, to assign attribution, and I think we're a little bit too early.
Yeah. So a poor feature classification choice is not an algorithmic problem by definition. It is just a poor feature classification choice. The algorithm, it wouldn't change, right? The underlying statistical random decision tree or decision forest or whatever choice they make in the statistical model, that's where the algorithm is. It's nothing to do with the feature classification.
Right. This algorithm could be perfect for a robotic vacuum, like an iRobot or other similar manufacturers of robotic vacuums. Because if it hits something that it's not supposed to, like maybe it learns, and that's okay, because the worst you might get is the worst you get is if it runs over dog poop that happens to be in your living room. Just throwing that out there. If speaking from experience,
that hasn't happened or anything.
Makes for a really bad day.
Really cleaning,
because it doesn't have a sensor currently that detects dog poop. So it just carries on its merry way all over your house. And so the other thing that you might end up with as a result is a ding in a piece of furniture, perhaps. But put that in a car, and now there's real tragedies that have occurred, as the case we talked about in Arizona. So that's not necessarily saying that the algorithm is bad or has a flaw. The implementation was just not perfect for that use case. And I mean, let's be honest, when we talk about cars, I mean, it has to be pretty damn near, like it has to be perfect, especially the part that talks about like not running people over.
But how perfect does it
Jeff,
actually have to be, though? Because when we start comparing automated cars to humans, which one are we probably going to trust more?
That's true.
Because how many humans do
problem.
humans kill in their cars every day?
A lot.
And there's probably going to be far fewer that get killed by these automated vehicles.
Correct.
But we're going to say it was a robot car that killed this one person. So get rid of robot cars, which is just...
That's an interesting comment, Patrick, because the challenge in the artificial intelligence world is you're trying to build feature classification for a lot of unknowns, right? Well, the biggest thing in this particular context of automated vehicles is one of the biggest unknowns is actually the humans. So if there was more algorithms operating the vehicles and less humans on the road,
be safer.
The conclusion would be the algorithms would actually be better off ultimately, and it's the humans that are the unknown variable that cause the additional complexity in the algorithms.
Absolutely. There was another accident just the other day, and the headline writers got in trouble for this one because there was a drunk driver that ran a red light, and another car saw that somebody was running the red light, and he veered off, and he hit an automated car. So the headline was, automated car involved in an accident, where everybody's comment was, well, if all three were automated, this never would have happened.
Right.
Exactly.
And,
but I had
you get into
I got a question for you off. So
we're all talking again.
feature
Did you catch that, Patrick? All right, this time, Keith.
Thank you. I actually went on the mutual back off this time. Routing joke for everybody on the call. So by feature specification, Joff, do you actually mean, or are you referring to like effectively the training of the algorithm, right? So like the bias in the algorithm is effectively by a result of what we've given it in terms of information?
Well, that's right. When you're building decision tree based algorithms, not neural networks, you use feature classifications to train them, and that's exactly right. And so the trick is to pick a minimal number of features that are diverse enough to make a good decision when you're training on some sort of corpus of data, right? It's actually it's a big talent to be able to pick the right feature classification measures when you're training any model, because there's a tendency, especially amongst those new to the industry, of developing these algorithms to overclassify. And if you overclassify, it's almost like analysis paralysis. You will never get a decision out of the algorithm when you actually deploy it for its job, right? So yes, I am talking about training the model.
Got it.
So similar to what Patrick was saying, I had that thought, when the accident first happened in Arizona, where, how many deaths are caused by humans, whoever the human is, driver, passenger, pedestrian, and how many deaths are we going to allow from automated cars? What's going to be the acceptable number? I don't know how you come up with that determination, but I wonder if that begins to get at a limitation to how far we can take technology and automation, because there are sort of ethical boundaries that we're not willing to cross, at least not yet.
Talk to an insurance actuary.
Well,
honestly.
And it's interesting. The author of the article is a law student, a doctor. He's going for his doctorate. So this is written by a future lawyer, which I think is interesting too.
So Amit has done a number of things in discussing legal bug bounty as well. So she's actually the sister of Karen Elazari, who's somewhat famous for her TED Talk on how hackers are the immune system of the internet. So it's interesting that she's brought this forward as well, because it makes me wonder to what extent people should be liable or pay bounties for bad training, another Pavlovian reference, versus bad algorithms, right?
Yeah, right. That's the meat of the discussion there. I mean, because bad training is really where it's at, in my opinion. And so I think we just have to be careful with terminology. The actual words in here, just to be exact here, are algorithmic decision making, which really does implicate the training of the system, right?
Mm-hmm. I wanted to switch to a story about an IoT related event that happened in Copenhagen, actually, where there's a company that provides about 2,000 it looks like electronic bicycles that are part of a ride-sharing system. I would imagine that the way that works is very similar, like a zip card, right? Like basically you rent a bike to go to point A and point B and return it, and you're renting it for that time. These are electronic. Now, the article really doesn't say that I could find what the actual vulnerability was. Each of the bikes are equipped with a tablet that includes GPS navigation and reports back to the company. But due to a privately disclosed flaw, this company had to update all of their bicycles, which means manually going out and applying the fix, or at least manually rebooting them. Required to manually update about 2,000 bikes. I think we had the similar conversation when we talked about hotel locks, and I think there's an interesting trade-off that we have with IoT. If we give IoT devices less connectivity, we can reduce the attack surface, and by reducing the connectivity, you reduce the number of ways in which an attacker can get in. However, by reducing the connectivity, you also make it much harder to update all of these devices and apply a regular firmware update. So what's the right solution for these providers of IoT devices that are providing things like locks and bicycles that now are facing the situation where there's thousands, tens of thousands of devices that maybe someone has to physically go plug a USB device? What's the risk trade-off?
Here's where crowdsourced updates, maybe, bounties for updates on bikes, right? Like you crowdsource a bunch of people to go out, find these bikes and update them on your behalf. You might actually get it done really quickly, updating them? fairly efficiently, and less costly. Maybe they beacon back based. It's like take your phone, go tether to these devices somehow locally, update them. They call back to the update server that they've been updated, and you're good, right?
Well, if they can call back to the update server, conceivably they could download an update, right? I think the thing is they don't have that. It sounds like they only have a GPS. The article makes it sound like they only have GPS and no kind of like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth even, or some even not NFC. That really wouldn't work potentially, but something that can carry enough data to do a firmware update that maybe when you dock it, it activates the firmware update. So you have to dock. The dock has the connectivity, but maybe the bicycles just have GPS.
And my guess is that they probably weren't built with any sort of Wi-Fi or Bluetooth enablement because there was no expectation that you'd be able to pair to them, right? So this is an architectural problem as well,
yes.
To the extent that you don't want to actually, or you can't expect to actually have Wi-Fi on them all the time, right? This is the Google Maps cars driving around mapping all of the Wi-Fi devices that are publicly accessible, right? Like same sort of problem. You can't actually go and leverage those on these bikes legally.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Moving
only
on.
That it's an opportunity.
Oh, Joff, sorry.
I just said only that it's an opportunity, right? I mean, you can see potential for some sort of out-of-band mechanism that is a separately developed IoT bolt-on that is a standardized update system.
What if it was like a drone, right? So it can connect to a specific like public-private key paired drone. So the public Wi-Fi is unique, and then the private password to it is maybe encrypted on the device. And then you just drone around the city to update all of these things.
While the user's riding the bike. Sorry.
It's a bike, so you have at least a little bit more manual control than a car, I think. So...
Paul, you can move on.
Thank you. There were 5 botnets found exploiting an unpatched GPON router vulnerability. Actually, there's multiple vulnerabilities. The exploit is publicly available in GitHub. Gigabit-capable passive optical network routers manufactured by a South Korean-based Dasan Zone Solutions have been found vulnerable to an authentication bypass and a non-root remote code execution vulnerability that allows them to take advantage of that. There are 5 different types of botnets with various different purposes and such. Mirai was one of them as well. And my guess would be that you're going to target these routers specifically to do things that are popular today, like send out denial of service attacks. If it's a gigabit optical router, I gotta imagine, Joff, that these are pretty high bandwidth devices capable of producing large amounts of traffic.
That's going to be a hell of a denial of service if you get enough of those things. So yeah, not good. Of course, it depends on the processor on the thing. Sometimes these end user devices that are designed for home markets are not actually able to push the amount of bandwidth that they claim to. But even if they can only push half of it, let's say they can push 500 megabit, right? That's still a hell of a lot of stuff when you get enough of them.
Right? Yeah, I'm not sure these are these home routers or these service provider based devices? Conceivably, it could be either. I mean,
passive optical network around. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I don't know actually.
Kind of interesting.
They're Wi-Fi routers, Paul. So they're definitely
okay.
home.
Okay.
Or at least office, right?
There you go.
It's the gigabit part that's getting me. That they can have the capacity, like Jobs said, to even send half of that. That's yikes.
Well, I mean, look at Ubiquity Network stuff, right? Can't Ubiquity Networks do gigabit as well? So to that extent, maybe we're thinking instead of a situation of, home, maybe it's business or small business.
Yep. Let's talk about Keith. We talked about this on Application Security Weekly, and I think we said we wanted to talk to Jeff about it. Now's our opportunity to do that. And this is Ray Ozzy's proposal for an encryption backdoor.
So we did not talk about this yet, but I am very curious.
Are we back in flipper chip land?
I thought we did. We talked about it somewhere. Oh, sorry. We talked about it in Hack Naked News. I'm getting my shows confused. Keith, you're off the hook. So basically, Jeff, have you seen Ray Ozzy's proposal for putting a backdoor in these systems?
Oh, that's easy. No.
Okay. So essentially...
Yeah, exactly.
Does everyone know who Ray Ozzy is?
No.
Actually, no, believe it or not.
Really? So he was Microsoft's CTO for a while. Before that, he created a program that I worked with back in the day. That's Lotus Notes. And he was recognized in the article as working for Microsoft and holding a very prominent role in Microsoft's history and software. And I'm like, that name sounds familiar, but for something different. And then I'm like, oh, right. He was the guy that wrote Lotus Notes. I remember that when I used to use Lotus.
Well, then I already don't like what his idea is.
You're probably not. Fair. I mean, even based on the title, when we use the word encryption and backdoor in the same sentence and or title, it's probably something we're not going to like. Essentially, Ray Ozzy is promoting an encryption backdoor. So there is a public key embedded inside of specific processors that the private key is then stored in this company's top secret vault with security controls around it. When law enforcement wants to gain access to the device, they can go have a mechanism to request the private key. That private key is pulled from the vault. It is then used to somehow generate a PIN that gives law enforcement access to that device. Once they have access, and I'm not sure what was a question for me was, like, it said that the access was only temporary and then the device was essentially destroyed as a result of accessing. The software knows that someone uses key to access it. But I'm assuming, like, how do they know when that kicks in? Like, law enforcement would conceivably need to look at something on the device. They've used a PIN to access it. Like, when they log out, when they turn it off and then turn it back on again, it says, well, someone used that key, so I'm going to self-destruct. Not quite sure how that would work. And also...
Honestly, so this is
ahead,
not being a cryptologist or cryptographer like Jeff. This is a situation where effectively you're trusting that keys inside of firmware won't be hard-coded, won't be easily crackable, and to that end, won't be easily pulled off the chips or devices themselves, right? So this is a problem of you're effectively back to Clipper chip, exactly as Joff said, right? Like you're literally putting it on the device, and quite frankly, like anyone that can access that device, by the way, as we've seen with Meltdown Inspector, I'm like combining the names there. This is probably not a good thing for a lot of reasons.
Ray Ozzy thinks it's a good idea. Anyway,
I mean, I sympathize with the desperate need that people have, that they feel like they have, to actually be able to intercept encryption. But we've got to remember, and law enforcement folks, if you're listening, everything is decrypted somewhere along the chain of communication, right? On the end device itself, it's going to be decrypted. So you don't necessarily need an encryption backdoor, and in fact, an encryption backdoor is very, very dangerous in most of the security community's opinion. And we have relitigated this, rediscussed it. Oh, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 times over the past 25 years, and everybody's consistent opinion is any kind of encryption backdoor is a bad idea.
Well, I think it violates
the
fundamental rules, right? Of something should be a secret. In this case, there's another company a third party that knows about your secrets, and that kind of violates the meaning of the word secrets, right? Also, encryption should provide some type of level of privacy and trust in that encryption process. You're essentially violating that by having another party have the keys. And to me, it violates everything that we like to think that should exist when we talk about encryption.
The real problem
it doesn't mean
keep talking all at the same time.
Jeff.
So, so Geoff beat me to it. It's exactly the Clipper chip, going back almost 25 years, I think. My opinion is that, law enforcement and, intel agencies need to kind of get over it. The encryption should be there. Having a back door is just kind of lazy and just trying to justify jobs. There are a whole lot of other ways to get at the data that you want to get at. Geoff suggested one way, or one big way, is that one end or the other, the data's got to be decrypted. And there's a whole lot of other ways to do it. Might be a little bit more costly, might be a little bit more time consuming. And I'm saying all this with grave concerns that the bad guys that do things like sex trafficking and slave trading and kiddie porn, and all those people get to run around and do their things because of this encryption technology. But that's just, that's just sort of where technology's gone. We were talking about it earlier. The advancement of technology is making us have to rethink how we do things. Is there a limitation? Probably somewhere. And I mean a cultural, societal limitation, not necessarily a technological limitation, if that makes sense.
I have a few comments, but feel free for anybody else to jump in first, because I've been taking a lot of airtime.
No, you're fine, dude.
So, to play devil's advocate, I think part of the problem with Geoff's suggestion is that people, at least in the United States, have the right to plead the fifth, right? So you can't make me unlock my device on your behalf. So you have to now get the other party to unlock the device to be able to read my messages, and they might not be in the United States, therefore you can't get them to unlock it on your behalf either. The other problem, though, and this is really where the crux of the problem exists, is you're opening up a broader consumer base to potentially being vulnerable to having open and clear traffic to a third party, because somewhere somebody needs to store this key. And if we know anything about governmental storage of secure information, i.e. OPM, you know that that's just not going to happen. So at the end of the day,
even
this
from
is
the time of Clipper
nothing
chip, Keith, even from the days of Clipper chip, the proposal was never that the government would be the escrow agency. Yeah. It was going to be a third party. And the only way that you got access to the key was through, court order, warrant, some sort of legal process.
It's going to be accessed by somebody somewhere, and whether it's a Stuxnet style sneaker through the door, a USB that ends up being infected that causes the stuff to get, shared back out, unless it's a micro generated key where it has maybe only 100 possible devices it could unlock for each key. Even then, it's probably still too many. You're going to run into a situation where the key is not being secured to the most high levels that it needs to be, and it's going to be walked out the door by somebody somewhere.
Right. That's exactly right. Think about it in terms of physical locks, right? I was just rewatching Deviant Olim's presentation at was Hacking Fest last year, right? He talks at length about all the master keys that he's got on his keyring for physical access to locks, right? Elevators, lock boxes, you name it, they're all available for sale on on the internet, mostly Amazon, our favorite shopping place, right? So I see this analogy there, right? If this kind of thing happens in the digital world, the game's over. There's no encryption anymore.
Which ultimately the harm is, it goes back to our discussion about the algorithm, right? Like, as unfortunate as it is for those situations, it's almost a situation of the harm that can be done by implementing this outweighs the harm that could be done by having effective encryption today, which is unfortunate for all of those situations that we think about in terms of sex trafficking or child pornography or those sorts of situations that, by the way, there are other behavioral indicators that you can catch those people with. You don't need to decrypt their phone to actually catch them. You can do things like look at the way that they are behaving as people and start to identify, potential needs for a subpoena or things of that nature.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying, Keith, and I'm oversimplifying by saying it's the lazy way to do law enforcement or national security, because there are other ways to accomplish what you need to accomplish. Now, on the flip side, given that encryption is about to be broken, at least public key cryptography is about to be broken in the next 10, 15 years. Maybe we need to start rethinking the use of encryption altogether as a blanket panacea for, or dare I say, silver bullet for providing the security of information or the privacy of information. Maybe we need to start thinking about what data is more or less important to protect and for how long, which is what we used to do in the DoD. And maybe we need to come up with different levels of encryption or levels of security to protect different levels of data that need to be protected for different amounts of time.
Yeah, that's a good comment, Jeff. And I think once you get into that discussion, you need to split the conversation into different disparate areas of, key management is one huge area, and key exchange is one huge area that's completely independent of, the various families of symmetric encryption algorithms, which are, very, very solid. And in my opinion, key exchange, key escrow, that topic is a much more thorny topic than the actual encryption topic. Even though you rightly point out with the leaps in computing technology, especially with quantum computing quickly coming, we're going to see the symmetric encryption algorithms be broken as well. But key exchange is a huge topic that needs to be really thought about.
The problem with what you're suggesting as well here, Jeff, in this case, is different levels of encryption. Ultimately, at the end of the day, criminals or people that have enough access to technology that they can pay someone to do this on their behalf will always use the highest level of encryption available. Because at some point somewhere it's been publicly disclosed in a white paper, or it's been discussed at a conference, or it's in academia somewhere, and it's eventually open and available to everybody. So I think that providing different levels of encryption is not realistic at the long run either.
Well, make sure you understand what I'm saying, Keith. I'm not suggesting that we try to prevent criminals and bad actors from having access to the highest levels of cryptography or security available to them. I'm saying we, the public, need to get over the belief that we need to have the nth degree of encryption and protection on everything we have and everything we do. We need, first, I guess, maybe more from a corporate or, from a business perspective, we need to start thinking about how much because all of this is ultimately going to cost money. How much do we want to spend, or how much do we need to spend to protect, the R&D work that we're doing that's going to produce, a new product that we're going to be able to make gazillions of dollars over the next 20 years versus, payroll versus our employees' PII data, and the list goes on. We try to lump everything together today and protect it all to the same degree, and I don't think we can do that. We haven't done that effectively to date.
There's also a significant ramp-up issue as well,
Sure.
That Jeff, you're well aware of. If you take an example, elliptic curve cryptography has been around for a long time. The actual implementations that have been pushed out have only come on the scene, relatively recently. So any kind of algorithmic decision takes forever to actually turn into, a production rollout. It is not a short process at all.
Right. Well, ultimately, I think we talk and we kid about and we say very seriously about there's no silver bullets in security, but the idea of encryption is still sort of a holy grail. I think it's something that people tend to think, well, that is the ultimate degree of security if we can afford it, if we can just encrypt the data. I think the lesson is, it's one element of security. It's something that you can do selectively and electively. There's a whole lot of other things you do. So again, going back to the laziness aspect, or the, what's the cheapest, quickest way to do something, just like everything else that we talk about in security, encryption is not a silver bullet. It protects data in a certain way, in a certain fashion. And I almost went the whole show without bringing up PCI. Damn it! You encrypt the data.
Good save, Jeff.
At rest, or you're encrypting the data in flight, and it's two different issues. And in flight is really what most of what we're talking about in terms of what's going to happen with the downfall of public key cryptography, because it's the backbone of all the secure communications that we have, that we're used to today. So what happens when that's blown up? Well, even if it's blown up, theoretically, and quantum cryptography, solves the problem, that's still an expensive solution. We're still talking, it's going to be years and years and years before, unlike Spectre and Meltdown, where it took a couple months for attacks to show up in the wild, it's still very computationally expensive, and not everybody's going to be able to run out and buy a quantum computer to solve all this. So, we have time. B, there's the end in sight. C, encryption is just one of many ways and things you do to provide security to whatever it is that you're trying to protect. But let's not get wrapped around the axle of it's not the only defense of our mobile devices and our personal data. There's other things we can do, like never write it down or never put it on certain devices.
Patrick, you had some more articles that you wanted to cover.
Well, one question that I had for you is, it seems as though a lot of your articles come from places like KrebsOnSecurity. I saw Motherboard, Dark Reading. Have you ever gotten any kind of security advice from TMZ?
Yes, probably.
Probably.
Well, actually, a listener did a statistical analysis of where all of our news articles are sourced from and sent it to us a while back, which is pretty...
I'm going to guess TMZ was not high on that list.
Probably not pretty high. No, we might have referenced it a couple of times in the past.
Yeah, so there was actually one that I saw, I think it was today, where remember when there were a whole bunch of pictures of celebrities nude that got leaked?
Which time?
Which time? That's right.
a lot of that.
Paul wants to know which folder he needs to open.
Yeah, where do I get those again?
Yeah, so I guess...
did you bring your copies of those?
I don't know if they're on this one. But I guess one of the hackers or so that was involved with that got sentenced today in court and got 57 months in prison for that, to which we got the great advice from none other than Paris Hilton, who said, don't trust the cloud. So we should not...
Thank you, Paris.
Right. So I thought it'd be great...
I heard she's going to be keynoting DerbyCon.
Is that what you...
I heard that's the rumor currently on the streets.
Rumor.
That's certainly an interesting one. Well, I guess while you're giving me the floor here, and before we go, I can also remind people again about the Social Engineering RI Conference. And one of the things I actually got in trouble for last time I was here was not mentioning my co-organizer, Lee Snyder, who is doing a ton of work on that conference as well. So I have to make sure that I mention the amount of work that Lee's doing as well.
That's important.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other listeners that said, hey, Lee is also organizing, and you should make sure to mention her.
Yeah,
it wasn't Lee herself that was...
Right. Lots
She's
of,
incredible. Just like as an aside, Lee is an incredible human being.
Yes,
throwing it out.
We all worked together at Brown.
We did.
Patrick,
Right.
Lee, and myself. So yes,
And-
he's an amazing person to work with, and shame on you for not.
I know that's why I had to
publicly
make sure I
mentioning
got it in.
That's good.
And Lee, Keith, and I have been working together on organizing B-Sides Boston conferences for a few years. So, yeah, we've been certainly busy
But
with all that
not
kind of.
this. So on the conference note, B-Sides Boston is in the fall.
I don't know.
This year is what I heard. That's another rumor. Probably more true than my Paris Hilton keynoting DerbyCon.
Who knows?
Who knows?
No, that really is.
Honestly,
a rumor.
it's up in the air at this point. From everything that I have seen and talked to the folks that are currently organizing it, because I've moved more into an advisory capacity than an actual organizer. The fall was suggested back in like January, February. I haven't heard anything since. I don't know if it's still happening this year at this point, which is unfortunate. But
It's going to be
who
a
knows?
secret. We're going to have to figure it out, and those that figure it out will get to attend the conference.
You'll have to know
It's
the
encrypted.
secret password.
Secret password. Secret website.
Another interesting one that I saw, and this is again more of the same kind of stuff. Where did you see the Alaska Secretary of State's office said that their voter registrations were accessed by the Russians?
I did not.
But they said that they don't feel as though that the actual election was compromised, and they don't feel as though any kind of votes were changed or people were added or removed from the rolls. To which the question
the
is,
Russians were just looking.
they were just looking.
Oh, they're just looking. It's fine.
Right.
It's fine.
No
Did
big
they
deal.
just come over in boats and walk into the town hall and just look at the
Well, you can see Russia from from Alaska anyway, so it's one thing that I've heard.
That's right. That's what I heard.
Right. But I guess the thing that I'm wondering, and these things don't come out in the article so much, is how does the Secretary of State's office exactly know how much that the Russians or anybody else? How do we even know it's the Russians actually? But how do they know?
The thing is, they don't.
Right. And how do they know what they did and didn't do? It seems like another of these kind of things where, don't worry, everything's okay, nothing to see here, move along, nothing bad happened, trust us, we know this for a fact.
Kind of like our security.
The real question is, how much did they fund their security team to confirm that?
How hard did they look?
Right.
That is ultimately your tell right there, is how much funding does the security team get to confirm that? And by the way, if it's one person for the year, I don't believe that for a minute.
They opened up their Excel spreadsheets and didn't see any Cyrillic and figured we're all good.
We're good. You had a story
So
in there.
actually, speaking of
Yes.
state stuff, by the way, I didn't put it as an article in the show notes, but the governor of Georgia vetoed that bill that would effectively outlaw any form of security research or disclosure. I don't know if any of you guys saw that.
God, they came to their senses in Atlanta.
They did.
I believe Mark Baggett had a little involvement in that. I don't know the details, but we might want to ask Mark about that one.
And there's a lot of security happening in the state of Georgia, specifically Atlanta. Of course, that's where Dell SecureWorks is headquartered. It's also where a lot of security research happens at the various universities in Georgia. There's also a lot about the political climate that could have swayed that either way, from what people, unnamed sources, have told me. And I'm glad to hear that the governor was not swayed by any force that would push them to passing that legislation and did in fact veto it. I think it's a huge win for the security community. And I'm sure a lot of those people probably don't want to be called out publicly or say exactly what they did in that helping them reach what I believe is the right decision. But thank you to the security community for coming together. And, certainly we publicized that this is a bad idea and it's happening. And if you can influence it, go influence it. And obviously that took place. So it's awesome.
Yep. So we're the ones that can take credit.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Because nobody else will.
I said influence, not control. Influence.
Jeff's happy to take credit for it.
Yeah, but I think it's your responsibility.
Absolutely.
I mean, if we have the knowledge and we stay silent, you're kind of complicit, right?
Yeah. You had an article in there about the top 50 influencers, and I think I'm going to have a very different take than what you're expecting on this particular story.
Yep.
Patrick. And I believe it relates to social engineering.
How is that?
So describe the story, and then I'll give my take and get the panel's assessment.
So while some of you other guys were talking, I kind of showed Paul this article that I brought tonight, which is just one of those ones that you normally see with the top 50 influencers, people to follow, that kind of thing. And the angle that I was going to take on it when I brought it here tonight was that frequently people come to me and they say, how do you get into security? How do you learn more? How do you stay current? You know, one of the classes that I teach, I often tell people that one of the things that you really need to do, especially is if you want to do penetration testing, is to stay current. And one of the things that people often ask is like, well, how do I do that, and how do I get that information? And one of the things that I often tell them is, believe it or not, Twitter is a great place to stay current with a lot of the people that you can follow. You know, everybody that's here on this show tonight is great people to follow because you get that kind of information.
And I would add, beyond Twitter, follow people in security that of various interests that are posting in various different mechanisms, whether they're producing a podcast or writing a blog, a regular blog, professionally, or just because, if they've got a GitHub repository, if they're on LinkedIn. But it's there's a lot of ways to follow.
It's usually a Twitter account that's going to point you to those kinds of things. That's how I find lots of blogs.
My picture in there, I know they got from LinkedIn because that's the only place I use it. So I don't know how they calculated this list of top 50, but they definitely got my picture from LinkedIn.
Right. Yep.
So the other thing that I like to say, and I mean, I've run the InfoSec Mentors project, so I say this with a bit of a grain of salt, but there are two different kinds of people in security. Those that want to be in security and those that are in security. I talk to a lot of people that seem to want to be in security, but they never actually take the effort of, you know, going and learning something, talking to people, asking or seeking out mentorship. That's a very big difference. And at the end of the day, if you want to be in security, you will be, because you've put forward the effort to actually join the community, to go out and learn things, to ask questions, to join Twitter and communicate with these people. I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, you can listen to this podcast, which is excellent. I'm very glad you do. But unless you actually take the next step and, you know, put your hands on the keyboard and do something about it, you'll never be in security. You'll just be on the sidelines watching.
So I like these articles if in the context you're talking about them now, in helping those that maybe want to get involved in security, find some resources and specific people in order to follow, in order to get specific information. However, this is a social engineering tactic. And I'm not saying it's necessarily all a bad thing, but just kind of be leery of this tactic because it is social engineering. So a company will go collect, and I think how they collect it is part of you know, my disagreement with some of these lists. If they're just, for example, going out to Twitter, maybe finding a list of security people, or basically automating the process, looking for everyone's security in their description or in their title on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and saying, well, who has the most followers? Take the top 50, automatically grab their bio, and maybe automatically write something, or just go in and add a sentence or two for each one, pushing out the post. To me, there's not a lot of thought going into that process. That's really just a list that's automatically generated, which may not be bad either. I mean, of course, sure, if you get value out of looking at these lists and following something new, someone new you hadn't, and you get good information, beautiful. However, what oftentimes these companies will do, and this varies depending on which company does it, and there's, you know, usually in any given year, there's about, you know, maybe half a dozen to 10 of these lists that are published. They'll also then, so they automatically, so the shady ones, I believe, and this is just my opinion, not based on really any actual research, but I think they automatically generate the list, they publish the blog post, then they go to everyone on the list and they contact them through maybe multiple means, via email, maybe on Twitter, maybe on LinkedIn, and say, hey, you've made a list, please retweet this. And what they're doing is social engineering everyone on the list to retweet them so that they can gain more followers or more page views to their blog to be able to improve their numbers, whether it be SEO straight on Google or social media. And that's where I kind of take issue and have been better about not falling victim to the, oh, you should retweet this kind of thing.
Kind of like the whole Follow Friday on Twitter.
Yeah, and Follow Friday is different because I don't think that, at least when I've seen a Follow Friday, there's nothing there to me that indicates that it's any kind of an automatically generated list. That's genuinely people who are like, I follow these people and I get good information, so therefore you should too. and there's a crowdsourced validation that comes from it. It's a person thinking about it, not an automated script that's just looking at who's got the highest numbers, which isn't equating to content. When you post a Follow Friday, you should be consuming content from those people and liking it and therefore recommending it to other people. I think that's a different process.
I just thought it was similar along the lines of how if I put out a Follow Friday with you on there and you retweet that, that's going to get me new followers.
Sure. And I'm sure there's people that do it just for the sake of, I want new followers, so maybe I'll go generate a list of the top 5 security people. That's my Follow Friday. If 1 or 2 of them retweets it, I get more followers.
I had never thought of that maliciously because I think I was always just so genuine about like the people that I follow Friday on, which by the way, it's very rare for me, but whenever I call someone out and follow Friday, it's because I've genuinely learned something from them or I appreciate the contribution to the community. So I had never thought of it that way.
I was about to say, you just hit the nail on the head, right? Because there's a difference between just trying to amplify the message for the sake of it and grab followers for the sake of it, versus what you were saying, Keith, really participating in the community, focusing actually on the content, trying to actually gain some useful knowledge and be a part of what's going on, right? There's another thing that, Keith, you just sort of reminded me of, and it's sort of the Hollywood effect, I think, of the InfoSec industry. Some of those people that sit on the sidelines and say they want to be part of the community, I think in a way they're sitting on the sidelines and wanting to be part of the community because of the Hollywood kind of effect of, it looks sexy, I must engage in this, but they're really ultimately not serious.
And look, I'm guilty. I'm guilty of this too. I mean, obviously, when we have guests who have a large following on the show, certainly we benefit from that if they say, hey, I was on Paul's Security Weekly. But the process that we use to vet guests, book guests on the show, is not like a randomly generated script that we run and magically people come on the show. Like, there's a lot of work in contacting people, getting them on the show, and then also preparing the right topic to make sure it matches our audience so that our audience gets as much as they can out of that interview. So we want everyone to learn from our guests, and some of our guests do have large followings. So, I admit, sure, we grew over the years from doing that, but we also made sure that when they came on that we were prepared with questions, that we had the right topics, and our audience learned from it to help the security community. Okay. So if you have suggestions for guests, so we'd love to hear them. Leonard Rose last week I thought was one of the best interviews that we've had on the show in some time. Certainly it was an awesome walk through history. And with someone where, we were just researching famous hackers and actually finding some of these lists of people who've published, using that as a resource and reading more about these guests and saying, I think that would be an interesting guest on the show because our listeners would benefit from what they have to say. And that always has to be a requirement for us. And so if you do have suggestions, you know where to find us on social media, on Twitter. We'd love to, especially if it's someone. I think today that Leonard certainly stated outright, like, I'm not in the public spotlight today. And I love having guests like that in the mix as well, because we're kind of bringing to light their story. So if you have people like that especially, I'd love to speak with them and get them on the show. Yeah, maybe along the same lines with that and what Keith was talking about, where he said he genuinely wants to call out people that seem to do good work or have been helpful. There was one this week that I guess I can kind of call out, that especially if you're a pen tester, everybody that I've seen that has seen this information has thought that it was awesome. Last week at the ThoughtCon conference, there was a guy, Ronnie Flathers, goes by Ropnop, did a presentation there on fun with LDAP and Kerberos in AD environments, and he released the slides for it. And it's incredible the kind of information that's on there for being able to access the whole AD environment and abusing the Kerberos and LDAP environments. Just the information that's in there seemed awesome. So that seems to be getting a whole lot of great feedback as well. So that's just something I want to call out that way. Yeah, and that's one of our tactics too for finding, in what you're describing is finding people to follow to get information. We also use similar tactics to find guests. I mean, if you presented at a conference, we're trying to look at all of those submissions and talk with the community about, well, who gave the most interesting talk or an interesting talk at a conference that might not be someone who has, tens of thousands of Twitter followers, but did a really awesome presentation. Finding those is gold as well. Yep.
if I can call out one more thing, even though it's
Do it.
personal. So I've been doing some research at work on passwords. So anybody that does penetration testing probably gets tons and tons of passwords, especially when you pull the NTDS file and all that kind of stuff, start cracking those. So we get about 30 or 40 people in my pen test team at work. So what I've been doing is every week, every time somebody gets those passwords, I've been kind of accumulating them, where I just kind of keep the passwords. I don't keep where they come from. I don't keep users, anything like that.
Just the clear text.
Just the clear text passwords,
on
right?
Its own. Sure.
As well as learning better techniques on how to crack the NTLM hashes myself. So what I've been doing is gaining research on the passwords that people actually choose. And that's been just fascinating. And I actually started writing a blog series on the Rapid7 site at blog.rapid7.com. And the first one came out today about the 3 most common passwords that people actually use. And it's kind of fun to be able to describe these kind of things. Everybody always thinks password. And yep, password still happens, and there's always...
Wait, I thought it was God, sex, and secret, God, secret, love. What was it from the
Rock You?
From the no,
or LinkedIn?
Hackers.
From hackers. It was from,
yeah, that's right.
Hackers.
Yeah, the 3 that always
that should be one of our trivia questions.
Yeah,
God, love, and sex. Is that?
It's always one of those 3, right?
What was it in the movie Hackers?
Secret. Pretty sure it was secret.
Secret.
Right. Unfortunately, most
I should know that. That should be a trivia question.
Password
There's
policy.
people screaming at us right now. The right answer, and I apologize. It's been a long couple of days.
Gotta
haven't
check
been
your
at Source Boston.
Twitter and see if it's there.
It probably is already.
So yeah, password is always one of the ones, but that's probably the lesser of the 3. The thing that I'm finding is the absolute most common password that people use is actually some variants of the company name, which is always kind of completely interesting. And then the third one that really fascinates me, and this one also seems to happen 100% of the time, is that our password policies that we usually require, and you kind of think of most of the password policies, is that it has to be at least 8 characters, sometimes more, but usually at least 8. And then we require at least 3 of upper, lower digit special. And we also require that people change their password about every 90 days, so every 3 months. And what else changes about every 3 months? Well, the seasons.
Seasons.
So that happens 100% of the time when we dump all the passwords. And even when I'm doing password spraying, guessing, that's really where I start. And that's the one that I was working on this week.
Appending, capital F fall if it's fall, or capital S
Absolutely.
spring if it's
when
spring.
I started, I did my open source intelligence gathering, got all the usernames. First password that I started with was spring 2018, and sure enough, a couple popped out. It's like, all right, just for fun, let's try winter 2018. More of those popped out. So it's just amazing how much these things always happen. So I got a little presentation that I'm kind of running around with, and I just tell people, make my job harder by eliminating these 3 passwords: the season, year, the company name, and any variant of the password. So just been...
And password 123.
Yes, password 123. And it's
going off that as well, Patrick.
Yep.
Johnny Christmas or Johnny Xmas's talk at Hackfest Canada 2017 goes through just this exact idea as well. And he actually, I think, discloses in the talk itself like a whole series of different password things that he tries in his penetration testing day to day that almost always, cause passwords. So if you're looking for, things that you should block from your password creation list, definitely go check that out, as well as, of course, Patrick's blog posts and the forthcoming series, it sounds like.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to try to keep writing as much as I can, keep up with getting new content and all that kind of stuff. And I think maybe one in the future, because I'm seeing this more and more, is how your help desk might not be so helpful with regard to security, with regard to passwords.
June 15th and 16th.
Yes.
Is the Social Engineering Rhode Island Conference.
It is.
Happening here at Salve Regina University in Newport,
Yes.
Rhode Island.
Yep. If you get more information at se-ri.org. We got our speakers up there, including one, Paul Isidorian, is going to be there speaking. We also have the guy who literally wrote the book on social engineering, Chris Hadnagy, Human Hacker. He's going to be there, and he has his own presentation about how to become a social engineer, and he's going to be moderating a panel of 4 winners from his social engineering Capture the Flag contest, and talking about how they do it, how they become great social engineers. We saw with Joe Gray tonight. He's one of the panelists that's going to be on there talking about his methodology and how he get that kind of information, along with Chris Kirsch. Whitney Maxwell is going to be on there, Jen Fox. So that it's all the really best of the best in social engineering going to be
A
there?
lot of folks have been asking me about the Social Engineering Rhode Island Conference, and the question is, well, first, like, hey, who's this Patrick guy? I'm like, Patrick's cool, dude. Like, Patrick and I go way back, okay? Like, we've organized conferences before. Yep. Patrick and Lee both are doing a fantastic job. Like, it's not a fly-by-night operation. It's not their first rodeo, okay?
We social engineered them into getting interested.
Yes. And then the next question is, well, should I go?
Absolutely.
And so, like, my first thing is, Patrick and Lee are awesome. They're members of the security community, and they've organized a lot of conferences before. The second thing is, yes, you absolutely should go. And if you are coming to this conference and you want to hang out with us like on that Thursday night, June 14th, we'll be recording a show. It's probably already been scheduled. We might even have, some guest line. You want to come here to the studio, send us communications, psw@securityweekly.com. Find us on Twitter and say, hey, I'm going to be in town. Can I swing by? As long as you let us know you're coming by. We'll welcome you here in the studio. If you want to be on the show, if you have topics you want to present on the show, let us know. So we're all here in Rhode Island during that time.
It sounds like it's Security Weekly open mic night almost.
Yes, it could be. Could be.
Wow.
If it entices you to come to the conference, you're welcome here, of course.
Feel free to bring cigars.
Bring cigars.
I'm convinced that Lee has social engineered me into running the volunteer team at SE Rhode Island. I haven't talked to her in a while, but she asked if I would at least volunteer, which, by the way, when that happened at B-Sides Boston, where I was a volunteer, I ended up being in charge of them a year later. So who knows?
You're on the hook now.
Sounds like Keith is the volunteer coordinator. So if you want to volunteer, talk to Keith.
And I think Sam has volunteered everyone here at Security Weekly to be a volunteer. Just if Lee's,
hoodie at
Lee's
securityweekly.com.
Yes, we're all in.
Excellent.
Newport's beautiful that time of year.
Man, I just looked at my calendar and I'm teaching that week. Crap. Oh well.
Oh well. You're always teaching somewhere, Jeff. And that's se-ri.org.
That is.
Go register. Like if you're like, yeah, I'm going, and you haven't bought a ticket yet, go buy a ticket.
Yeah, don't get shut out. Get your tickets today.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for participating in the show. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. That concludes this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Over and out.